Hello everyone, your pal 6-Speed here, and I know it's been a little while. Unfortunately, I've been crazy busy with work. We moved our shop facility from, one place to another when you got 40 or 50 ton pieces of CNC machinery. It's a bit of a hectic move to bring a high up crane truck in and whatnot. So it's been a little bit trying the last couple months, so I'm sorry I haven't been able to upload anything new aside from my amazing Scenic Rush tour. That was a lot of fun. I'll link that in the description. Anyway, the point is, I should probably tell by the title of this video, things didn't exactly go the best. So long story short, my wife and I were up at Christina Lake on vacation, visiting my grandparents, and brought the boat up there like we always do. And we were out on the final run of the season, the trip, sorry, my mistake. And we had done a 20-mile round trip down to the head of the lake sometime in the afternoon. My grandpa and we went to a gas station quickly to grab a paper, and I needed to go grab some more fuel for the boat. And so I threw that fresh gas in the boat. We went for one more rip around the lake. And as I'm coming to approach the dock, I let the throttle back up a little bit, and all of a sudden, the thing would just hardly run. Take a look for yourself.
Try crank it again.
So don't know what was wrong with it at the time. It was definitely only running on 2 cylinders for sure. I mean, it was reasonably smooth when it ran. Usually 1 cylinder, it's got a bit of a roughness to it if it's down 1 cylinder. So I didn't have the tools or the resources at the time to mess around with it, and luckily for me, I was just about to take it out of the water. So I mean, it's not like it died at the beginning or the middle of our vacation. So I towed it there with a little 7.5 horse Merc to just around the corner to the marina. Went and grabbed the Kia, put it in the water. Put the trailer in the water, pulled the boat up, went home that day. The next day. So took it out of the water in the evening, went home the next morning. Didn't have a lot of time to mess around with it. When I got to it finally, my first thought was maybe I got some bad gas because I just put some fresh gas in it. My first thought was, did I forget to put oil in it? And my grandpa could vouch for me that I did, because I remember him asking me, what I was doing. I had in my measuring cup and stuff like that. So that definitely wasn't the issue. But either or, maybe I had some raunchy stale gas or something like that. So I drained as much fuel out of the carbs as I possibly could, drained the line completely, drained the fuel pump completely, put some fresh Chevron 94 in it, which is ungodly expensive, because you can only get it in Canada, and I usually fill up in the States. And Canadian gas is way more expensive than U.S. gas. So, point is, ran it for about 5 minutes or so. No change, no improvement at all. Still only running on 2 cylinders. It runs better when you give it a little more throttle. Anyway, what I noticed is that it did not use near as much fuel as I expected it to on the trip around the lake. I also noticed at one point that all of a sudden the motor it kind of fell back a bit, like it was kind of going, all of a sudden a little, like it was very subtle. I thought maybe I hit a bump and the throttle popped back up a bit. When you get close to wide open throttle, the throttle has a tendency to spring back up if you don't hold it down, which I kind of like, because then you can't overspeed the engine by accident. So I didn't think anything of it. So obviously the new fresh fuel didn't work. So when messing around with it, I noticed that I had a bit of a hiss whenever I turned the flywheel, kind of the number 1 pointer past kind of the 0 mark. And I realized that the fuel pump base gasket was leaking really badly. So the vacuum, so there's a pressure pulse that comes from the crankcase, and that is how it pumps the fuel. So basically there's a diaphragm, and as the pressure pulses back and forth, there's two check valves. So one that allows the fuel to come in on the pull stroke, or the vacuum, and then another one that allows the fuel to come out into the carbs on the pressure stroke. So, and the one-way check valve on the intake side doesn't allow the fuel to go back into the tank, and vice versa with sucking the fuel out of the carburetors. The point is, ordered a new fuel pump kit. It was like $13. It was really cheap. Like a factory, I think it was a Sierra one. I can't remember. Either way, it wasn't some no-name brand, whatever. Put it in there, hit the key, same problem. So then I knew that there was something a little bit bigger going on than that. I thought maybe because it only had two cylinders that fuel pump leaking would have caused a vacuum leak through the crankcase, and it wouldn't be able to pull fuel into the top two cylinders. So after running it for a little while, I noticed that the two bottom spark plugs weren't warm at all, and the two top spark plugs were starting to get hot, like they were heating up. So that's pretty much a dead indication right away that there was no fire on the two bottom cylinders. Now on this motor, for those of you who aren't familiar with early vintage Mercurys, Mercurys generally have a carburetor. Well, in the years of the inline engines, leading up to the 80s sometime, I don't know specifics, but before the days of the clamshell cover of the Black Max era in the late 80s, early 90s, for the smaller horsepower motors, they used a carb for every two cylinders. So a two-cylinder had one carb, a four-cylinder has two, so one for the top two cylinders, one for the bottom, and a sixth has three. So the two top, the two middle, and the two bottom. So then at that point I was thinking, okay, well, it could be a carburation issue. So I went and bought a little bit of liquid fire from Walmart, and I gave it just a little sniff in the bottom carburetor, and nothing changed while it was running. So it was running, and I gave a little pss, and no change. And so I gave the top a little, and all of a sudden the motor just bleh, and it just bogged right out and kind of stumbled a bit, and then all of a sudden it came back to life. So obviously giving extra fuel, it didn't like that, but that kind of proved the point that all I needed was a little whiff in the top, and it should have picked it up, started running, if it was in fact a carburation issue. So I kind of give a good blast in the bottom. Probably shouldn't have, but after giving it a good shot of starting fluid, it while it was running, it didn't pick up at all. No noticeable change at all. So at that point, I took the spark plug lead off the back, stuck my screwdriver in there, put it up against a ground point, and I could see I had a beauty spark coming off the thing. So, you can kind of tell I'm kind of going through the fast tech method here. So fuel had no effect, which could have pointed to something ignition related. I have a beautiful spark, so like a really strong blue spark. And I kind of can assume that the timing's correct, considering the fact that the top two cylinders run, and it runs okay. Then once you start giving it a little more throttle, it smooths out. So upon doing a little more research, it's starting to seem like perhaps the bottom crankshaft seal might be blown out. And according to the vintage Mercury outboard fanatics, thank God for them. There's one guy in particular, his name's Thomas, lives in Sweden. He's been extraordinarily helpful to me. He seems to know everything about these motors. And so what a lot of people have said is that's a very common problem on old Mercury outboards that got a lot of hours on them. And I mean, this thing's a 71. It's 47 years old. It's never been rebuilt. It's never been opened up ever. Like, all the bolts have their original wire ties still on them. So obviously this thing's all original, and to be honest, it wasn't the best cared for. Like, two-strokes don't require a ton of care, but either way, it had a lot of hard hours on it from being beaten on by all my relatives over the years. And it's probably received most of its love in the last couple of years since I've owned it. I've put all new seals in the lower unit, new water pump, plugs, all that stuff. So, unfortunately, like I said, it's just not, it just doesn't want to live. So, I haven't gotten to mess around with it in the last few weeks. I've been extraordinarily busy again, just with life and stuff like that. Had to do some fixes on the Kia and stuff like that. So unfortunately, I have to kind of fix my daily driver if there's an issue with it before I can work on the boat, right? So I'm hoping, so today is Saturday, September the 15th. I'm hoping tomorrow I can put a compression gauge to it and see what I have. If I got reasonable compression or relatively balanced across all 4 cylinders, then I'm pretty much hook, line, and sinker that lower crankshaft seal is gone, because what it's going to do is it's just going to leak vacuum straight through it, and it's not going to be able to pull the fuel in. I heard it's unlikely to be a reed valve, because generally when a reed valve breaks, it takes the rest of the motor out with it, because a piece of metal doesn't like to go through the engine without causing a whole ton of damage. Also, it'll tend to spit out the carburetor, out the bottom carburetor, or whatever carburetor has the broken reed on it, and that is not an issue. It's clearly not spitting back through the thing. It still starts and it runs, even though it's only running on 2 cylinders, so I can't imagine that something is catastrophically blown up inside it. If a piston pin clip came out, it probably would have seized up in the middle of the water. Upon further reading again, crankshaft seals will only tend to present themselves as an issue at lower RPM. When you get up to higher RPM, as you bring the RPM up, it tends to have less of an issue, although it will be lean on those cylinders that are closest to that seal. So that might have explained it. It might have blown out while I was going along, and that little change in RPM as I was going along might have been it. And not realizing that was an issue. And I never came to a stop until I approached the dock. We were at cruising speed the whole time. So, and from that point on, I've never had the boat out since. I've played around with it a little bit, but other than that, nothing. So, could this be the end of the 19th hole? I don't know. I don't want to throw a brand new motor at it, because I'm looking at $8,000 to $10,000. I mean, and I'd have to retrofit a new steering system on it, and I just, that's my wife and I, that's our down payment on a house, or part of our down payment on a house, and I just don't want to throw that kind of money at it. Used motors are few and far between, unfortunately. I found anything from $3,000 to $5,000, and that's still very, very expensive. Especially because it all seems to be in the States, and if I wanted to bring it through the border, obviously then there's duty and tax and stuff like that. So I'm still getting close to what a brand new motor would cost. So if it's the lower crank seal, yeah, I could pull the power head and replace it and just keep on running it. But if I'm pulling the power head, I may as well freshen that motor up. So upon doing some research, even if I had to have the cylinders bored out at a machine shop, I'm still looking at less than $1,000 if I did all the work myself. We throw things like a carb kit, new timing belt, new water pump, et cetera, at it. So basically freshen that whole motor right up, rebuild the carbs, that kind of thing. So if I decide what to do with this thing, if I decide to keep it, that might be the course of action, really. I don't want to go spend $5,000-$6,000 on a used motor, just to end up with a motor that's got a bunch of hard use on it. The cheapest one I could find is a 60 horse at $3,200, and that had lived in salt all its life. I'm just asking for more problems than I already have, because this has basically been a lake boat its whole life. I take it out in brackish water sometimes, out in the river, but it only goes out for an hour and then it comes out and gets flushed and run and cleaned off every time. So it's never had long-term exposure to anything like that. So it's been surprisingly good, and it's a great little motor. It's been super reliable up until now. So we'll have to see. I have to do a little bit more investigative work. I don't want to go ahead and rebuild it just to have it burn up again either. So I want to make sure I know what the issue was before I go dive right into it. So could this be the end of the 19th hole? I don't know. I don't really want to get rid of it because it's been in my family for almost 60 years. Am I choked about it? Yeah, I was pretty upset. Not much you can do. I mean, the thing's almost 50 years old. It had almost a 50-year run without any issues. So, what do I do, right? So we'll wait and see what the compression test results are. If they're decent, then I'll have to pull the power head off, do a little exploratory surgery, and figure out what's going on underneath there. Like, if I smoke test it or leak test it, and I can see that it's just pouring out that lower crank seal, then I know that that's the problem. I'm fairly certain that that's it, but I can't be 100%. So right now we're just kind of waiting and seeing, I guess. So yeah, appreciate all you watching and listening to me babble. More to come, I guess, in the Is This the End of the 19th Hole series. I was hoping to do So You Want to Buy a Boat series for all of you guys, like a basics about boating. Can't really do that without a boat, unfortunately, so that's kind of stalled out probably till next season. But if we decide to rebuild it, it's going to be a great video series for you guys. So yeah, we'll take a look from this point on and make a decision.